Enter the Stars, and originally I had planned on bringing this to you live today on Blind 11. But as far back as I can remember, every Blind 11 there seems to be some kind of internet problems where everything's running at about half or quarter speed, making it impossible to live stream. So I put together this presentation so that you guys could get the message loud and clear on the 17th anniversary of Blind 11. Now we're going to start from the beginning and delve into the origins of the World Slave Center. It starts with the very foundation of the World Slave Center itself, the very foundation. Now this is odd because the foundation aligns to a perfect 119 degrees. Now this was no accident, and as we get into the history of the Slim Towers, you'll understand why and how this could be 119 degrees, which of course is Blind 11 backwards. When construction began, nobody was talking about an emergency number 911. This wouldn't happen until the late 1970s, and the 911 emergency number did not go national until the late 80s. So, in the 60s, when this foundation was laid, nobody knew about a 911 emergency number. And this is where things get cryptic, because I believe that the 911 emergency number dovetailed in with the event to come. Now, the World Slave Center originated out of coin-op machines. That was the original purpose when legislation was brought to bear to bring the World Slave Center into existence. As crazy as that sounds, it started with coin-op machines. These were the new technology at the time, and they were looking to take this internationally, and they needed a center of trade. In fact, the New York state government approved the plans for a World Slave Center on the very day that Bush Jr. was born into this world. The day and year, July 6, 1946. Bush Sr. was just starting at Yale. He was in his 20s when his son was born, the very president under which the towers would fall. Is this a coincidence? Well, as we get further into this documentary, you're going to understand that there are no coincidences. Now, the person who passed this legislation, his name was Dewey, Thomas Dewey, and the Bushes openly admit their connections to this Thomas Dewey, the very man that would establish the World Slave Center, was worshipped by the entire Bush family. Now, to put this in perspective, a man who the Bush family worshipped, who tried to run for president himself in New York, who approved the board of directors for the concept of the World Slave Center on the day that Bush was born, and he would be the president under which they would fall. This is insane that nobody saw these connections earlier. Now, within this same decade of the infant stages of the World Slave Center, Trump was attending a school, Q Forest. And by the time I end up explaining to you what Q is, you will wonder if it relates back to the Q that we are talking about today, QAnon. Now, Q schools had their roots in secret societies, and they were fashioned after Marxists, Wilhelm Wundt, John Dewey, which supposedly is a different Dewey than the Thomas Dewey that we mentioned earlier, G. Stanley Hall, and Hegelian ideologies. These were the roots of the Q schools that Trump attended. Trump's father was actually on the board of directors for the grammar school that Trump went to. He was heavily involved, and he donated to the construction of a wing while Trump was there in grade school, pre-teen. Q would then become the basis for the entire restructured educational system in America. Yale developed the strategy of how to control through education, and Q schools were the implementation of those strategies. The philosophy was in these schools is that we are cattle, essentially, and that education is merely seen as a mind control tool to prepare people to be slaves, rather than to find their full potential in life and utilize their true gifts. And if you're more interested in how Q ties into Yale and Trump's Q Marxist education, there will be a link in the description. Now let's look at some of the numerology attached to the event that literally no other channels are talking about. The World Slave Center opened on 4/4 in the year 33. 1973 was the Hebrew year. 5733 was the Hebrew year it opened. And we all know the implications of the magic number 33. The towers would stand for 28 total years. And I've showed on previous videos how those 28 years really represented some kind of Christ ritual. 28 generations from David to Christ. And then the sacrifice. 1987 was the halfway point. It was the 14th year from 1973 to 2001. And that just so happened to be the year, the exact halfway point to the event that Building 7 opened. It was like they knew. This building opened in the Hebrew year 47, which was 1987. It was 47 stories tall, no accident. And look at the 61 in the numbers, which was all about the year it would fall. The Hebrew year 61, which equates to 2001. Now, some of this numerology goes very, very deep. What I've learned to do with this event is to narrow it down to the most profound parts of the numerology. And that brings us into the 88s. Now, the 88s were shown in film and movie leading up to the event, and then carried over after the event, because every year on Blind 11, they shine 88 xenon lights up into the sky. Why the 88s? Well, the columns were actually two 8-pointed columns. Yes, they weren't 4-sided, they were 8-sided because each of the edges was beveled. They did this on purpose because the 88s represent the Greek Zeus Christ gematria equivalent. And this had to be all along a ritual. Now this is going to blow you away because the two towers represented the two thieves standing at the sides of Christ at the cross. Christ represented building 7, 7 being a number of divinity, which also fell. So here you have a ritual, the 88s being representative of the Zeus version of Christ as well. Now let's get into Egypt. This is fascinating. After the towers fell, the new center, the new tower was raised. The two became one, all smashed together into an anti-prism. What is an anti-prism? Well, it is the sulfur molecule. So in effect, the new center, the new tower, became a giant middle finger to the sky because God rained down sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah. Now you are starting to understand what this is really all about. Now Egypt goes deeper because when they raised that one tower, it basically made a layout that looks like Giza with the 3 pyramids spread out. And associations have been made with Giza to Orion, the belt of Orion. Those 3 stars are laid out just like those 3 buildings, the towers and the new one tower. And so what we have here is this weird overlay. So the Pharaoh said, if you're going to wage plagues upon me and not let me enslave your people, then I am going to wage war back on your son. And that's what he did on the event. Now, what most people don't know is there are exactly 19 tridents, count them yourself, that made up the Slim Towers. And it just so happens there was 19 hijackers. Let's talk a little bit about the holograms. How did they do it? Well, what you're looking at on your screen is relief polarization grading. Now, no one else has come up with this theory yet. Stay with me on this. To put it simply, it's an interference pattern for a holographic laser. Now, right now, the applications for this, from what we're told, is for imaging, medical imaging, microscopes, things like that. Basically recreates the image from what is seen through the microscope into a holographic three-dimensional image. But we know that these applications can easily be adjusted. Now, many people complained that the Slim Towers caused headaches and dizziness from looking at them. What many people don't know is that all of those the outside part of the Slim Towers was coated in aluminum, which is one of the best electromagnetic conductors. In fact, this grating was actually coated in aluminum as well for some of these applications of holograms. The grating is coated in aluminum just like the Slim Towers were. And you can see clearly the grating in the design of the towers. And that is what would be necessary to produce a holographic image. This would also explain why some people saw planes and some people didn't. This is common with holograms. You can only see the hologram from a certain angle from where you're standing. So to simplify the way this technology works, they shoot a very intense laser at the surface of the grating. Inside the laser, the beam of light is encoded the image. The laser hits the surface of this grating and it scatters to form the image. A prism works in much the same way. Now, they can use multiple lasers shot onto the graded surface for a better 3D effect and to provide more detail and data to the image. So could this explain why so many people felt intense burning feeling? They felt like they had to jump while they were waiting to be saved because of these lasers being shot? Now, as I said, this technology was developed for holographic microscopic imaging. But we can see how they could easily manipulate this to a larger scale to recreate life-size holograms. So you guessed it, the towers were probably giant movie screens. Now this gives us an entirely new perspective on the album by Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. That released 34 days before the towers opened in 1973. On that album cover, there was actually a prism, the same type of technology that I just described to you that could create a hologram. And in that album, they had songs called Money, Us and Them, which could be a play on words. Us could be US. Another song was On the Run. The songs were done on a 28-track mixing desk. Remember the 28 years that they stood? And in one song, an airport is featured with exploding plane sound effects. In fact, the performances matched the album version, and at the end of the song, a model airplane during the concerts would fly from one end of the arena to the other. appearing to crash in a brilliant explosion. Another song called Money, there were sound effects of cash registers and loose change. And remember, the Slim Towers were centers of money, and their origins were found in coin-op machines. Inside the sleeve were 2 posters and 2 pyramid-themed stickers. You see, they knew. One poster bore pictures of the band in concert, overlaid with scattered letters to form Pink Floyd, and the other an infrared photograph of the Great Pyramids of Giza. Then, of course, we had all of the foreshadowing in film and TV long before the event would happen, and in some cases before it was even built, before the foundation was even laid. For instance, this documentary released on 9/12, the day after, blind 11 years before it happened. It was called The Cruise, and they show this guy coming to the WTC Plaza, and he spins around in circles looking up, and he lays on the ground, and he even says in the documentary some pretty damning evidence and words, but he seems to match this exact pose of the falling man. It's unbelievable. We also have The Wicker Man. Now, this film came out in 1973, the very year that the WTC opened. And I believe that The Wicker Man represented the straw man economy, because at the end of the film, they lit it on fire with people inside. Exactly what happened to the towers. Released in 73, same year the towers would open, and the star of the film died on 11/16/09. 11/16/09. Flip that number upside down and tell me what you get. Now, the Burning Man Festival allegedly found its origins in the Wicker Man film cult, but many people are denying those associations. But the thing about the Wicker Man was it was all about a Celtic cult, a sacrificial cult where they would lure people in with money and food and women, and then they would sacrifice them in this Wicker Man tower. Now, before we get much deeper into these pre-Blind 11 films, we got to look more at the layout of the WTC. This is the entire complex before it fell. And here you clearly see that the mall underneath the plaza looks like it's laid out into the Eye of Ra, which would fit right into its Egyptian motif. Now, the purpose of this documentary is to summarize some of these things that we've already covered on this channel. So you can go look back by subject and topic and find everything you need to know about what I cover here in this summary. Now, what you're looking at here is a tarot card from the film, the Bond film, Live and Let Die. And they pull this card and they talk about this tower falling, and that Bond is going to bring this terror, right? He's going to bring destruction to this tower. This is all in the film. The film actually even takes place in New York. They burn one of the other tarot cards that looks like it has the 2 pillars of Yakum and Boaz on it. These are screenshots from the film. And the album shows an apple, a green apple. The album by Paul McCartney. There's much more to this. I encourage you to watch this decode that I did on Live and Let Die. It's under a different name, but you can look at the screenshots and it will tell you what you're looking at. Now, this 2 pillars, the May poles, the May pillars, it all fits in with this Celtic sacrifice. Here's a movie cover poster from 1933, already showing what appears to be the Slim Towers with King Kong. Here you can almost see a 9 wisping around and surrounding Godzilla versus Megalon. You can see a 9, and then the towers become the 11. This was back in 1973, around the time that these opened. Film actually released in 76, but was created in 73. Here you see one-way ticket to hell. This was long before the towers opened. And you take the word one-way ticket and spell the acronym backwards, it's TWO, which is 2. So you have 2 towers. And some of this imagery here. Here you see 2 towers behind these people as well. It's like the people on the inside knew it was going to happen. And that's pretty bizarre. Here's another film called Deluge. And they show buildings falling into their own footprint. But before they show that, they actually show Genesis 9:11 at the opening of this film. Obviously, this is in black and white, very old film, before the towers even opened. And here you see the actual buildings falling, and there's a very extended scene. This was cutting edge at its time. This was from 1933. Remember, the towers opened in the Hebrew year 33. So this was a foreshadowing, a precursor. They have this extended scene of buildings falling into their own footprint. None of them fall sideways. They fall into their own footprint. Almost like they were pre-programming us. Here's Superman. Before the event, they're flying like planes through, well, they don't go through them, they fly around them, the towers. Now people can say, oh, you're just finding stuff that looks like that. No, there is a pattern here. This was known either on a spiritual, demonic level, or known in plain sight. Here's the squeeze. This came out in the halfway point. Remember, 1987 was the 14th year, showing damage to the towers. The 93 bombing hadn't even happened yet. Here's another one called The Curse. This released on Blind 11/87 at the halfway point. And in this film, The Curse, everything turns to dust. And the house falls into dust in its own footprint. The town that it takes place in was incorporated in 1911. It was 9 + 1 + 1 minutes long. You can't make this up. Again, there's more videos on this channel going into far more detail on some of these decodes. Now this one surprised me. Staying Alive, 2001 Odyssey. 2001 hadn't happened yet. Staying Alive came out in the 70s. But yet here it is, 2001 Odyssey. And there's John Travolta, of course. There's a scene where he actually walks. This is right after he walks in front of the Slim Towers over a bridge. And then he walks by the 2001 Odyssey. Now here's was the set design for his final dance scene in this film. And there's actually, I think, 11 teeth on that skull. You have to see the decode I did on it. There's like 9 on the bottom and 11 on top or something like that. It's crazy. And there's your Christ reference. Remember, this was a Christ ritual. He has his arms outstretched as if crucified. They're carrying him. And there's the set. People falling, dust, destruction. They're like, it now with hindsight, with eyes to see, it totally looks like the scene. And there's a lot more to that decode as well. Now we get into King Kong. This was 1976, I believe. And again, there's Blind 11 imagery on the movie cover posters. They seem to encode and hide the 9 on the cover in plain sight. Both of these covers. The Godzilla was actually a copycat cover. The towers don't even appear in the Godzilla film. They just put it on the cover. That's the backstory behind it. But you see the 9 on the cover. You also see the 9 on the King Kong cover. And the word King, K-I, K is the 11th letter and I is the 9th letter. You have 11-9. Here also in the King Kong film, you see 8 + 1 is 9 on the gas tank, and then 2 on the other side. That's 1 and 1. So you have Blind 11 on the gas pump. This film, The Believers, went along the lines of the evil satanic part of all this, which is milk sacrifice, okay, blood sacrifice and all of that. And they delve into that, and voodoo, and that all links in as well. We saw a voodoo theme in Live and Let Die as well, so it carries over. Now what you're looking at here is Texas, and the Pope arrived long before Blind 11. The Pope arrived, and they set up these 2 towers behind the Pope. And these towers fell down in the wind. A freak storm came and blew these towers over. And this happened, I believe, on 9/12, is when this actually took place, when the towers fell over. So there's all this esoteric stuff going on a spiritual level. Now, why would the towers of that fall? Well, I think that's all part of it. I think this is really all about tearing it down, order out of chaos to rebuild it. The Catholic Church is part of that, make no mistake. Eventually, they're going to pull down the Catholic Church. That's what they're working on. And this sex scandal in the Catholic Church, yes, it's happening, but it's also part of tearing down all religion. People are basically going to say the Christians were supposed to protect the children, and they're the worst offenders, and this is why they let the Catholic priests go haywire with no consequences. Now this is a remake with The Rock in it called Rampage, and they show this dinosaur basically blast through this building just like the plane blasted through. It's the same exact imagery with an explosion coming out the other side. And in the dust, you can almost make out 119 in the dust here from the film Rampage with The Rock. Now, some of these older films, The Wiz, are really old, and they actually come right out and show you that New York is Egypt when they go into the Emerald City. And you see IXXI, which is Blind 11, it's the Roman numerals of it. You see also this weird airplane dashboard imagery. Of course, the pyramids, green, Emerald City. We know that the Emerald Tablets are from Egypt. And The Wiz is all about the as above, so below, as you can see here in the movie cover poster with the mirroring effect. And money, see, they go into a vault because the world center is the vault of money. And they show that here as they go into the Emerald City, and then you see the layout of the Belt of Orion, which is the layout of the former towers and the new Freedom Tower. They do a dance scene in the Emerald City right there in the plaza of the center. It's filmed there. And that thing you're seeing in the middle is called the sphere. Now it looks like an eye. It's got like an optic nerve coming out of the bottom of it. The front of it's like broken off, so you can actually see that it looks like an eye. Well, that would make perfect sense, because the eye is between the 2 towers. This film obviously is The Incredibles, and here they show the skyline of New York. Incredibles 2. And there you see what appears to be the skyline of New York with the 2 towers. Now this is post Blind 11, obviously, but they like to keep giving us MK Ultra mind control trauma of the past event without coming right out and showing it. They hide it underneath the surface, and we still experience the same feelings. Now this is from the film Dragnet, and they actually show a coded Blind 11 number on the tail of this plane. TC is Trade Center 8, 9, 10, 11, and then there's the 6. Flip that upside down, you got Blind 11. The letter N is 14. That's the 14th year, and that was the year that the film released. Here's more on The Squeeze with Michael Keaton. Did a full decode on that. There's much, much more to that, tying that in to Blind 11 as well. Now, even the music industry got in on this, with REM, Stand in the Place Where You Were, or Stand, I think they called it for short. And many of you will remember this music video. And they show this boy walking across the top of this roof line, and they show the Slim Towers in the background as he flies like an airplane, walking along the roof right into the Slim Towers. Now, at the very least, people have to admit something is going on at least a spiritual level for all of this stuff to be manifesting the way we're seeing it now. I believe this was an Avengers movie. This is the newest Avengers movie. This is an example of them instilling MK Ultra trauma over and over, even after the event, to remind us of why we're fighting, right? They won't come right out and say it, but this is it. He throws his daughter off of this cliff from between these towers. She hits the ground and dies, and in the ground you can see the numbers 119 as she's laying there. You're going to have to go look at the film to actually see this scene and see for yourself if you see 119. Don't take my word for it. Here's another rock film. He loves these tower films. I think this one was called The Pearl or The Tower, about this self-sufficient, self-sustaining tower that they built, the world's largest tower. And here you see the red on top, the green on the bottom. The red represents man, the green is the serpent, and they want to pull us down to hell. Now, there's so much more to this, and you're probably wondering why. Why would they do this? One, it's their war that they wage on God. This is what they do. This is what it's all about. But it goes deeper too, because it goes into the greed sector. Greed and money, control, domination. The United States has the worst opium addiction problem in the world compared to all other countries. We don't consume the most, but percentage, per capita, we have the most, and we have the most power. Here's a map showing the percentage of the world population abusing opioids by country. And as you can see, the United States is on top. Well, there exists what I am calling the white oil pipeline coming out of Afghanistan, the world's largest producer of opium, yet it's all black market opium. There is no market for it in the licit market. It's all illicit. So why are the soldiers over there guarding it if it's all illicit opium? Well, I believe this is being repurposed. The opium from Afghanistan is going through Turkey, but it first goes through Iran, which is why the U.S. wants control of Iran. And then the U.S., quote unquote, buys its opium from Turkey, mostly. About 80% of the opium that comes into America for pharmaceutical grade purposes comes from Turkey. The other part of it comes from India. And there's an agreement with the United Nations for this to happen, and there's a lot of controls in place. But I believe that the drugs are being laundered through Turkey from Afghanistan. So, that concludes this documentary. Hopefully all this starts to make sense for you guys. Again, we are free thinkers. The day we can't think freely about all these things and discuss these things without calling for violence, without calling for any kind of harm to any individuals, but just to discuss these things about what really happens, then that is the day the world is over. Here's the thing. How do you combat this? You don't buy their lies. You don't buy into their system. You don't buy into their consumerism and their ideologies about education and career and consumption. That's how you fight this. And you show other people that they're lying. And this is all a scam. Their world system of money. Take care and be safe, you guys.